Welcome. Today, we are diving headfirst into a massive historical mystery. We're going to sift through some really ancient records, looking for clues about one of the most legendary conflicts ever told, the Trojan War. You know the story from Homer's Iliad. It's an epic tale of gods, heroes, and a brutal 10-year siege. But historians have been debating one huge question for centuries. Is any of it true? Is this epic story actually based on a real historical war from the Bronze Age? So first, let's just quickly set the stage with the legend itself. You've got this grand alliance of Greek kingdoms, right? And they launch 1,000 ships to attack the powerful city of Troy over in western Anatolia, all because the beautiful Helen was taken. Okay, so where do we even begin to look for answers? Well, it just so happens that at the exact same time the Trojan War was supposedly raging, there was a major power dominating the whole region, the Hittite Empire. And lucky for us, they kept incredibly detailed records. You see, the Hittites were a bureaucratic powerhouse. I mean, they left behind thousands of clay tablets detailing everything from huge royal treaties to snippy diplomatic letters. And hidden within all that writing are some really revealing clues about their neighbors to the west. So as historians were going through these thousands of documents, they noticed something. The Hittite scribes kept mentioning this group of people who were causing all sorts of trouble on their western frontier, a group they called the Ahiyawa. So the big question is, who were the Ahiyawa? Well, the vast majority of scholars now agree that Ahiyawa is almost certainly the Hittite way of saying Achaeans, which, and this is the important part, is one of the main names Homer uses for the Greeks in the Iliad. And believe me, the connections do not stop there. The records also talk about a city in northwestern Anatolia they called Wilusa. Now say that out loud, Wilusa. It's a nearly perfect linguistic match for Ilios, which was a Greek name for Troy. They even mention a place called Tarwisa, which is, you guessed it, incredibly close to Troya. And it gets even better. There's this one specific document, it's known as the Tawagalawa letter, that actually mentions a direct conflict between the Hittites and the Ahiyawa, the Greeks, over the city of Wilusa. I mean, on the surface, this really does seem like a smoking gun, doesn't it? The plot just keeps thickening when we start looking at the names of the people involved. These records don't just mention places that sound familiar, they seem to mention some of the key characters, too. Okay, so there's this formal Hittite treaty, right? And it dates to the early 13th century BCE. It was made with the king of Wilusa, and his name was Alexandru. Alexander. The connection is it's tantalizing. It's so close to Paris Alexander, the Trojan prince whose abduction of Helen supposedly kicked off the whole war in the first place. The letters also talk about another guy, a very powerful and really active war leader in western Anatolia who was, let's just say, a constant thorn in the Hittite side. His name was Radu. And here we go again. The name is just striking. Radu. Priam. It seems almost too perfect. Could this be a match for the old king of Troy, the father of Paris and Hector? So let's recap. We seem to have the right people in the right place at the right time. Case closed, right? The Trojan War was real. Well, not so fast. This is exactly where the whole beautiful story starts to get really complicated. All right, let's start with Alexandru. Remember that treaty? He signed it as the king of Wilusa. He was making deals directly with the Hittite emperor. That just doesn't fit the legend of Paris, who was only a prince, and he wasn't even the heir to the throne. The problem with Radu is even bigger. I mean, far from being Troy's king, the records actually paint him as an enemy of Wilusa. He was ravaging its allies and may have even attacked the city itself. And to top it all off, the timeline puts him after Alexandru, which makes it chronologically impossible for him to be Alexandru's father, Priam. So what about just the general idea of Greeks fighting in Anatolia around 1200 BCE? Well, the Hittite records absolutely confirm this was happening. But here's the thing. It wasn't a special one-off event. It had been going on for centuries, since at least 1400 BCE. It was just how things were back then. Oh, and that big conflict over Wilusa? The one that looked like the smoking gun? The Hittite letter actually says the disagreement, which for all we know could have been about something like trade routes, was resolved peacefully. That is a pretty far cry from a brutal 10-year war that ends with the city burned to the ground. So, after laying out all this evidence, the good and the bad, where do we land?
What can these incredible ancient records really tell us about the Trojan War?
Well, the Hittite documents absolutely confirm a world that is totally consistent with the legend. They paint a vivid picture of Greek-speaking peoples clashing with the local kingdoms in Western Anatolia during the Late Bronze Age. That much is real.
But here's the thing. While the setting is right, the story just doesn't line up. The connections to Homer's famous characters, they all fall apart when you look closely. The so-called war over Walusa was a minor dispute. And all those raids were just part of a centuries-long pattern, not one single epic siege. So the final verdict has to be this. While these records are historically invaluable, they're an amazing window into the Bronze Age, they simply cannot be used as definitive proof that Homer's epic story was a historical fact.
And that kind of leaves us with a fascinating final thought. Homer's specific story of the Trojan War might not be literal history, but the world it was born from, a world of raids, of shifting alliances, and of constant conflict between Greeks and Anatolians, that world was absolutely 100% real.